Thank you guys so much for coming out tonight. I think we're gonna have an awesome night. We have some wonderful panelists here to share some really great information about PR. My name is Amanda Sibley. I work at HubSpot for Startups, and I'm thrilled to be here with you all today. I'd love to hand it over to the panelists to introduce themselves, and as you do, I would love for you to answer the question, what is news and what is not news?
Hi, everyone. I'm Lara Sorokanich. I'm an editor at Fast Company magazine. A big part of my job is just figuring out that exact question, what is and isn't news. And unfortunately, I don't have just like one simple answer for you guys. Otherwise, I wouldn't have a job. So a lot of what is news to you guys is not necessarily going to be news to us as the media. So things like your launch, while it's great, we love to hear about it, it's probably too early for us to write about it. Things like changes in your executives, birthdays, things like that, investment rounds. Again, great information for us to have, not necessarily news that we are going to write about. That said, when you pitch something to us as news, we like to think of it in a larger innovation economy. So try to think about what you're doing in the context of how is it changing your specific industry, how is it changing the world, how is it making people's lives better, and that kind of context will help you to help us write a good story that people are going to be engaged with and that we want to put out into the world.
Thank you.
Yep. Hi, everyone. I'm Ryan Wells. I'm a managing director of communications at Nasdaq. At Nasdaq, I work on our market technology business and also all of our technology initiatives at the company, including Nasdaq Ventures. I actually just relocated back from London. I was there for 4 years, so we're on the flip side, looking from an in-house standpoint. The way I see it is the businesses will come to me and say, hey, I want to get this out. Let's get some media around this. And I got to put in that kind of, I don't know, this is going to work or not. So usually kind of I have a rule of like, well, if it's awards and rankings, I'm like, hey, you know what? No one's going to cover that. That goes in the marketing team. They promote that for you. I can't do it because no one's going to write about it. Software updates, that's good for some clients. Media's probably not going to cover it. Things like that. And also too, like middle management hires, that's probably not going to also get picked up. But then on the flip side, what could potentially, M&A deals, if you have a really interesting product launch, if there's C-suite level hires. So it kind of runs the gamut. I think you need to also kind of, figure out where you think this is going to get into. I mean, most likely, if it's, a small deal, I don't know if it's going to get into a tier 1 outlet. It potentially might. But, there's such a wide range of different outlets out there to consider. So, I guess that's, yeah.
I'm Tyler Perry. I'm partner and president at Bateman Group. We're a communications firm. Actually, a lot of our clients are up on these walls, so I'm looking at their names now. Not to be trite, I think there has to be something new about news, right? And people need to find it interesting, important, and think about who is really going to find it interesting and important. If it's at your company, that's great, but it's probably not news. Maybe post it on your intranet or whatever. But if a lot of people are going to be, inspired to change or change their behavior or need to know something, then that can kind of calibrate how newsy is your news. So I'll sometimes think, is my mom going to be interested in this? Or is my friend, is my, one of my clients, are they going to see that this is going to make an impact on them and let that calibrate where you go with it?
Wonderful, thank you. So Tyler, first question is for you. We're going to use some jargon tonight that folks may or may not know about in the PR world. So I'd love if you could give a quick primer on the various different types of media. So we've got shared media, owned media, paid, earned media. Where do press releases fall into this, and what does each one of those really mean to you?
Okay. So when we start with an example, so let's say you have some incredible data that you've gleaned from your platform. You've got some really interesting insights, and you think, I think people need to know about this. So if you pitch it, let's say I call up Lara, and I'm like, I've got something amazing. And she ends up writing a story that's earned media. I did not pay for it, and publishes in Fast Company. Then Ryan sees it, and he says, whoa, this is so interesting. I need to share this on LinkedIn. So that's shared media, so when something is shared over social. Owned media, if you say, I really want to make sure that everybody gets how cool this data is, and then you write it on your blog. Owned media is something that is, on a web property that you own. Paid media, if you think, you know what, this is really great, and I want to make sure that certain people really see this, then you can pay for it. So that's going to be a sponsored tweet where it's literally hand-delivered to Ryan's friend. Or you can, for a publication, you can do like a sponsored article and pay for it. Press releases, I think, kind of fall in between that the owned and paid. You write your story, but it's basically a tool for journalists, and I don't think they're using them as much, but it's a tool for journalists where all of the information about that amazing data is contained. You pay for it to be distributed over a newswire. Public companies really need to pay attention to this because they have to disclose certain information over appropriate channels, but for startups, that's kind of the source code of your news.
Wonderful, thank you. So kind of double click on that one a little bit. We have a lot of startups, a lot of founders in the room, and they're strained for resources, strained for time, strained for money. Do you ever think, and this is a question for anyone we can answer, is there ever a time where a startup should start focusing on paid media, or should they really put all of their investment early on into earned media?
I'll take it, yeah. So I think before you start even spending money on PR, I think you need to sort of triage what you're working with and where your business is. So if you are tiny and you don't have anything in marketing, if you're just getting started, what's going to fuel your PR program we call it like an asset triage. So if you've got pedigree executives, if you've got some really market business momentum, customers that are willing to talk to the media, if you have really good stories. So before you even start looking at paid media, I would make sure that you've got stuff to say and stuff that's going to fuel a program. I would say if you don't, think about if you get an email or if you're reading stuff that you're really interested in and then you see this sponsored content pepper up, and if you're like, ugh, I'm not touching that, that's what your content could look like, right? So if you, I mean, it's true, you really want to think about where is this going to run, and so if you just really want to get a certain message out or really want to reach people, then I think getting a smart marketing program is better than a sponsored post, especially if you don't really have a program behind it.
And just to add to that, I would say probably with earned media, it's grueling and it takes time. You really need to get to know the reporters you work with or that will cover your company long term. You're not going to get instant gratification on earned media. It really does take time. So, even if you start by just generally just introducing yourself to a really targeted list of journalists. It cannot be a big, wide push. It needs to be very targeted, and then get to know them, right? Be a source for them about stuff, and maybe start figuring out ways to write things, whether it's on your own blog or find ways to pitch, your own writing to an outlet, just to show that you actually have some substance to you, and they can really take you seriously as a brand. So the paid media, I think, it gets you there quicker, but I don't know if it also has as much effectiveness. I mean, and in many instances it does, but you just can't say, okay, I'm going to start doing earned media immediately, and I'm going to have a ton of coverage. It takes a long time.
Yeah, and just to sort of piggyback off of that, I get a lot of pitches from startups who are very enthusiastic about getting earned media coverage right off the bat. And it does take time. We do have to see you prove your concept out. We have to see what success you have, because I get pitched hundreds and hundreds of startups every single day. That said, if you take the time to form a relationship with us, if you take the time to sort of take us on your journey, that's definitely a great way for you to sort of get in our minds, us to think about you. And the media is always also thinking about overall trends. So I may not have a story to write about you right now. But if you are part of a trend of, say, I think we just did a story on athletic branded beers. Once we see 5 of those come through our desk, it's like, okay, there's a story there, and I'll reach back out to you 6 months, 9 months, a year later, and ask you about how you guys are doing, what you've been doing, any new products. And that can sort of be a really good resource for getting your foot in the door, getting more coverage, just sort of building a relationship with us over time. And I realize it's probably frustrating to sort of feel like you're throwing spaghetti at a wall and nothing's sticking. But it does really pay off over time. Our job is to sort of be a brain trust of everything that's out there. And if you have a relationship with us, it's always possible that we can pull you out of that brain trust and plug you into another trend story, or somewhere else in our issue where we're looking for someone of your business's specific caliber or product.
Awesome, thank you. So Ryan and Lara, you both just touched a fair amount on brand recognition and getting to know a brand before they just pitch you something. I know you just gave some great examples. I'd love if we could dig into that a little bit more. Are there any specific examples of successful pitches that startups have brought to you, any one of you, that is something that we could give to the audience as some tips and tricks for the next time they're looking to, maybe their first time they're pitching something and how they're doing that, or maybe it's, they've pitched you a few times and they need some help. Any suggestions there?
I don't know if I have a specific example, but I will say something particularly at Fast Company that we do a lot is we look for a story within your story. So the fact that your product exists might not be our story, but the fact that your product exists because you worked at a big tech company and realized that they weren't using this kind of data effectively, and then you started leveraging it in a totally new way, that backstory is more of something that we would want to tell rather than just that you own a data company or that you're launching a new product. If there are people on your team with really interesting backgrounds, if you are using your product in a way you launched, for one purpose, and then you figured out that you could actually be a great solution in a totally different industry. Stories like that are really compelling to us. They're the kinds of stories we want to tell. So when you're pitching to us, don't just think about how you want the name of your company and what you do to be in our magazine. That's not really going to be something that gets our attention. Think about the story within your story, whether that's how your product was created, who's on your team, what you guys are doing, how you're saving the world. Think about the greater narrative of what we can tell about your company, not just about us sort of being an advertisement for you and what you do.
I can just chime in real quick too. On our end, for instance, we'll start working in particular different customer segments. We'll start from launching a new product. So it might be a completely different space that I'm familiar with. To give you an example, so what we tend to do is we'll work with the marketing team, we'll work with the sales team, we'll work with the product team to kind of develop more or less like what's going to be our go-to-market strategy. So on my end, I've got to deal with the press side and figure out how we want to do the outreach. It depends on what it is, but we kind of do we do a press release, do a blog post? So if we get to that point where I'm already going to start doing the outreach to the press, I got to figure out how I craft the pitch. If I don't know the journalist, that really kind of gets them engaged immediately. I mean, even down to the subject line. I mean, there's ways that you just go about it that you want them to open it. You want them to immediately know what they're wanting. What are you trying to get to them, right? What do you want to have them understand? Because as Lara says, she gets thousands of these a day. So you kind of have to, for me at least on our side, kind of get to the point a lot faster, in the pitch, know what it is, and then also have substance in it too. And a lot of times I just bulleted out a few things just so it's really clear to read, and they have to have some substance to it. So, and I usually go to the business and I say, guys, we need to get some coverage here. You want the coverage? So I really need the content from you guys to help me out here. So then that's where they kind of help me kind of beef it up a little bit more. And then, hopefully that gets at least a conversation going with a journalist to be able to have those conversations and maybe lead to some coverage.
Yeah, and I'll just say on that note, I also want to emphasize what you come to us with on your first try is probably not going to be the story that we run. It's probably not what we're going to find interesting about your company. So just be patient. And in a lot of ways, I respect startups coming to me and saying, you know what, we have this really great idea. It's not quite off the ground yet. It's not quite where I think you would want to cover it yet, but I want to tell you why this product is great. I want to tell you why it's going to change the world in 1, 2, 3, 5 years from now. And I would rather have that ongoing relationship with you where you're honest with me and I know that you'll tell me the truth about what's going on with your product. And then sometime in the future when you have a big breakthrough, I'll be familiar with you, I'll trust you, and I'll be much more willing to sort of say, yeah, I've looked at the growth of this company from the very beginning. And it's worth it for us to write about. You're not going to trick us into writing about you by like trying to make yourself seem more relevant or more world-changing right now than you are. But if you form that relationship with us, certainly, I mean, we want to tell great stories. We want to promote great businesses, and just have patience with us and believe in your product, and we probably will too over time.
So I have one final question for you that's on this topic. I apologize that there's a lot here. You're talking a lot about building relationships, getting to know folks over a period of time. How do you want people to communicate with you? Is it email? Is it calling? Is it showing up at your office? Is it gift baskets? Is it stalking you at AWS Lofts?
Don't stalk me. That's a really good question. And again, if there were a simple answer for it, our lives would all be a lot easier, probably, or not mine. But I think trust that if you're doing work that's really amazing, and if you're spending all of this time working on your startup, you should think what you're doing is really amazing. Trust that we will recognize it, and that we'll be able to find it, and the impact that you have in the world will help us figure out who you are. Now, on like a more practical level, I don't know. I read a lot of emails. Like I don't just control alt delete. I really try to look through my emails. If you hire someone like Tyler in PR who has relationships with media, PR does exist in a lot of ways because we form relationships with people at PR firms who we then trust to tell us stories that they know we would be interested in. It's a complicated question. I think your time would be better spent investing in your product and making sure that you are doing something really great than trying to figure out how to woo us into writing about you, because if you are doing great work, we will find you.
Wonderful, thank you.
And one thing too, on just on a very practical level, when I pitch, I give them, it depends on what outlet it is, but I give them one follow-up. I don't go beyond that.
Yeah.
So if they, for instance, I send something out and I don't get a response back, I try to hold off on the calls unless it's like seriously urgent. I just find it, they're probably, if it was me, if I was a journalist, I'm just jamming working, and I got someone calling me and go, hey, I sent you that email, and they're gonna be like, I don't have time for, just email me again about it. So I give it at least one follow-up. So I'll just follow up, I'll just say, hey, just a quick flag, just so you saw this, let me know if you want to talk. Very simple. If they don't want to do, if they don't come back, you know what? Oh well. You'll have another shot at it. Just give it a little rest and then come back, another time when you can reach out to them. I just think if you keep bombarding them, you're going to get blacklisted, frankly.
Awesome, thank you. All right, so we're going to shift gears a little bit. There's been a lot of questions coming in about hiring a PR firm. When is it right to do that? What to have in mind? What is the budget there? So Tyler, I'd love to have you address a few of those. When do you suggest startups look to hire a PR firm? What is the minimum budget they should be expected to have aside? And what else should they think about in that realm?
Yeah, so there's a ton of PR options. I will just be perfectly candid. There's some great ones and some garbage. And so I would say PR's got a terrible reputation as an industry. I'm desperately trying to shift that, but one step at a time. So I think start with asking either brands that you really respect and think are doing an incredible job on PR for recommendations of who they work with, or people that you trust, and have a conversation with them and get a sense of how they work, what they cost. A lot of agencies will have minimums. I think, many will fall in the sort of 15 to 20, 25,000 a month range. So that's a big investment depending on where you are in your life cycle. And so I know I talked about this before with this asset triage, but I would really start and think, is your business ready for PR? So our job is to get in and find the amazing people and stories and innovations that are going on at your company. Think about who needs to hear that and try and match the two, right? So with media, with content marketing, kind of doing the whole 9 yards. If you were light on those assets, I would suggest you spend that money building those assets before you invest in PR, because otherwise you're going to have all these expectations. You hired this PR firm saying, oh my God, we're spending $15,000 a month with you. This is nuts. And they don't have anything to work with. So, we have a ton of relationships. We have former journalists on staff that crossed over to the dark side. So that can only get you so far. You need assets to work with. And so I would, really take a critical look at, are you ready? Can you really fuel a big program? And if not, then I think I'm a huge proponent, and we talk to a lot of earlier stage startups, and I'll say, you are not ready, but here's what I would recommend. And I think there are some free tools, which I know we're going to talk about, but there's also going to an independent contractor, someone that is going to be able to give you a lot more focus, a focused program, but it's going to be less than retaining a bigger agency.
Wonderful, thank you.
I have a lot of strong feelings about that topic, as you can see.
So lots of questions coming in about social media. I'm going to try to combine them because I think each one of you will touch them separately. Lara, for you, how does social media play into you finding stories, as well as do you ever get reached out to on social media, and that's a good form of outreach for you or a bad form?
So if social media is a big part of what your brand is, if you have a product, I'm trying to think of brands that have really excellent social media, or that are some of these direct-to-consumer, millennial-focused companies do really awesome work on social media that is noticed, not just by us in the media, but by everybody. If that's you, go ahead and throw lots of money behind that. If that's going to get you customers, if that's going to help you get brand recognition among the general public, go ahead and do that. As far as using social media specifically to try to woo earned media, it's just like everything else in the digital age, where there are so many tweets, there are so many Instagrams, there are so many TikToks and other things going on in the world. I would not bank on us finding you through social media. I would not bank on us finding you because you have a great Twitter or because you have a great Instagram account. As far as reaching out goes, I would recommend, if you're really interested in an outlet, if you're really interested in a specific writer at an outlet, reporter, follow them on social media so that you become more familiar with the kinds of stories they write and why they may want to write about you. The best thing that you can do is sort of come to us and pitch us a story that we will want to write. So the more that you can learn about a brand or a writer based on their social media, yeah, go ahead and follow them. If I tweet about something and you think that your startup is totally relevant and you have a great story that's exactly about that tweet, sure, reply to my tweet. But I wouldn't bank on it for the sole purpose of trying to get to the earned media, because there's millions and millions and millions of accounts out there and tweets every day, and we can't possibly see them all.
Awesome, thank you. Anything to add? I have another social media related topic, if not.
I'll go.
Awesome.
Yeah, go ahead.
So more so for both Ryan and Tyler, how do you feel about, and have you ever been in a situation where there's been bad press online? Maybe it's a CEO at a company or someone that you're working with has tweeted something and you need to handle that. How do you handle crisis communications, and what advice do you have for the early stage companies in this room if something like that were to happen, or maybe has happened in a founder's past?
Go ahead.
You go ahead.
Yeah, I guess I mean, it's impossible for any company to avoid something happening to them, right? So it just depends on exactly what it is, how it gets out there, how it gets picked up, et cetera. The first thing you need to do immediately is to get back to a journalist so they touch base with you about it. So for whatever reason, they may see something out there and they just, whether it's someone who's tweets something or it's something that they more or less see. So you need to respond immediately. And if you don't even know what it is yet, in the sense of you don't know the root cause, still say, we're investigating, looking into it, we'll be back as soon as we can. Because the worst thing you want out there is they said, we can't reach this company. That's really, really bad in terms of what it looks like to customers and the general public, right? So you want to be able to get there as quickly as you can to be able to say that, hey, you're at least investigating the matter. We'll be back as soon as we can, and we'll update you when we can, right? So that's at least from a kind of a more sort of like product standpoint, or something happens that with your business, getting the immediacy is crucial on that end.
Yeah, I think I would agree with Ryan. I think you want to get the facts, figure out what is going on. And we worked with a company that had a ton of big CPGs as clients. And something happened that was negative, and we were like, oh my God, this is horrendous. But if you're a diaper company, right, you're getting so many nasty tweets all the time. So a nasty tweet to you is like, whatever, this is table stakes. If this is a nasty tweet, or something that one of your executives has done and it's really terrible, I think you really want to, get in front of it. You always acknowledge that you've made a mistake, right? There's no point in trying to weasel out of it. Be very crisp and clear and honest, and you talk about, you acknowledge it, you apologize, and talk about what you're going to do to make sure it doesn't happen again. I think the best way to get ahead of it is you hope for the best always, but plan for the worst. So if you kind of are starting to get more public with your brand, if you are consumer facing and you have a lot of touch points with multiple people in your audience, get a group together and say, what could happen? What are our vulnerabilities? And develop a real sense of what that looks like and how would you respond? Because it's really hard to plan for a crisis when you're in the middle of one, and that's when you start doing stupid things, or you start babbling incessantly, or reveal way too much information when it isn't warranted. So the more you can get ahead of it and just sort of know what could happen, and then hope you never have to deal with that, but getting in front of it helps you make that problem even worse.
Awesome, thank you. What are some other pitfalls that startups can expect while they're trying to gain PR for their business?
Well, I was going to say, I think exaggerating to the press is going to be a problem for you. Yeah. So I think if you have to be humble about what your business is and what you guys do in terms of the kind of the messaging. Think about like how just your whole persona, right? Whether it's on your website, whether it's on your business cards, whether it's basically anything that you do that's publicly facing, that you need to kind of think about how you look, what kind of words you use. Things like that are really important, and it may seem trivial, but that stuff does get noticed, and whether that rubs a certain journalist the wrong way about, I don't know, like you go to someone's website and you're like, this looks crazy. I don't even know what these people do, and it's really hard to understand. Like those types of things are really small. So it's very small details are important. And like I said, like if you put out a press release, which is by all means, you can get coverage from those. But just think about how you develop that press release, right? Think about. Again, not getting too way ahead of yourselves in terms of what you say, what you guys are going to do. Like, are you going to change the world? I mean, again, like think about if you're a reader. Well, everyone's here a reader, but if you're a journalist or whatnot, you're going to probably look at it like, okay, I've heard this before. Sure, yeah, you're really going to change the world. So you just think about, again, like having that internal gut check as you're kind of working through the materials that you create. Again, whether it's press releases, if you're writing an article or whatnot, just think like, okay, if I was going to read this, am I going to think this is ridiculous? And if you feel it is, then delete that, and get it a little tighter, get it more, frankly, more realistic, right? So if you've got news, and it will get picked up if it's the right targeted audience for it. And you're not, again, like over exaggerating what exactly you do.
Yeah, I agree with that. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
For as much as I have said, tell us why you're changing the world, don't ever use the phrase, we're changing the world, because that doesn't mean anything to anybody anymore. It's overused. Tell us the truth of what you're doing, and tell us the specific details of why it's cool, why it's interesting, why it is innovative, and that will help a lot. I think some common pitfalls I see, I get 1 million pitches a day that are it's a very tired thing that are like, this is a woman with a company. And it's like, it's 2019. There are lots of women-led companies, and they're amazing, and there are lots of women with amazing stories about their companies. But you're not going to reel me in with a PR email that says a woman-led company. We'll notice if your founder or your co-founder or someone on your executive team is a woman. We are aware of that. We want to tell stories about lots of different kinds of founders. Do try to stay away from those kinds of cliches, and be specific, and try to tell us the truth about why it is that you are interesting and exciting, and not sort of a generalization or a jargony, like over-the-top catchphrase.
I think there are two examples that I think you'll probably be familiar with that I think illustrate what could go wrong. Does anybody remember Color, the photo sharing app? Yeah, there's a hand back there. Appreciate that. So they launched, and it really required a network effect, so that if I was in a restaurant taking pictures of my meal, which I find incredibly irritating anyway, and then Ryan's there, we can share photos, which is, I don't know. Anyway, so that could happen, which would be really exciting for some. But you need to have more people on the network. And so they had all these journalists. Robert Scoble downloaded it, and he's like, what is this? This is garbage. And they had set it up in such a giant way. The expectations were so high. I think they had an extraordinary amount of funding. And the vitriol that came out of the media after this, it was appalling. Like, if you Google it, I mean, it's really sad, because they didn't have enough scale, and so you've got this app that requires a network, and you don't have a network, and so the experience is going to be kind of terrible. But I think there was so much hype going in behind the brand, and they just didn't. The business wasn't there. So again, probably should have triaged their assets to see if that was ready. I think another one that also, Ryan, you made me think of is Bodega. Remember that? 2 years ago, that went off like a lead balloon as well. I wrote an article about that for TechCrunch because I was a little outraged, and it was just tone deaf. So they launched, I think they were trying to disrupt the bodega, but they had all these super bougie, products in this vending machine that, was in these super bougie areas, and New Yorkers were outraged because bodegas are our lifeblood, and it was very clear that they had not consulted communications. How is this going to land? Is this going to offend anyone? And the response was horrendous. And I think the media because again, sometimes the story that you want to read is somebody's failure. That's unfortunately human nature, right? So think about that. And if you're walking into that, you want to take a step back and think, how is this going to land? Is there any way that this might be off-putting or offensive? And if there's even a doubt, then I would not amplify that to the world.
And just real quick, one last thing I was going to say in terms of when you're on your strategy with this, the targeted journalists approach is absolutely crucial with this. And for instance, if you don't have an agency to lean on for this, and for instance, you might not have an in-house communications person, you might have to do it yourself. And this is something I do myself. I don't really rely on anyone else doing it. But if I have a particular pitch, I really spend a lot of time just really getting into the media, really read it, really find out what so-and-so writes. And so if you don't know, for instance, that, I don't know, at the Wall Street Journal, who covers, mobile devices, you're not going to know it immediately, but you have to really comb the website. You need to go through, look for kind of a pattern of who kind of covers it. Look for their bios, see what they have there, And then if it makes sense, throw them in an Excel sheet. Like that's going to be one of your people that you're going to want to make friends with, right? Or relationship with. That's who you want to make outreach to. And also, not to mention, you kind of need their contact info, right? Because you can't just go to the About Us section of a website unless it's like a very tiny media outlet of like 3 people. that's maybe okay. But you can't go to the Wall Street Journal and go, I'm going to go to the editorial at WSJ.com and email the entire staff of the Wall Street Journal. That's not probably going to work for you. So a lot of these news outlets, a lot of the journalists have their email on the bottom of the story. Sometimes it's in their bio. Maybe it's on Twitter too. Maybe they have a way to contact them that way. If not, there's also public relations software where that kind of a media database that also helps you with that. But again, like the whole thing again is like really if you know your audience just like you do potential clients, prospects, et cetera. You know who to target there. It's the same with journalists. There's not going to be everyone in the world to target. It's going to be a very select few of journalists, and there's tons of outlets, so you're going to have plenty to choose from. But just keep it really targeted.
Yeah, and just piggybacking off of that, you really should know who you're reaching out to. Sometimes I get emails that are like, I love your writing at Fast Company. I don't write for Fast Company for the most part. I mean, there are like 2 stories on Fast Company's website that I've written. I'm an editor. We have people who write. They're wonderful. They have amazing stories. We have people who edit. Don't come at me and act like you're really familiar with my work when I know that you're not, because most of what I do is unseen. So be really careful about that. Don't spell people's names wrong. That's just like, my name is Lara, L-A-R-A. Whenever I get a Laura, L-A-U-R-A, it's just a little sloppy, and like that can help you to not get put in the delete box immediately.
I get Ashley at least once a day.
Yeah.
I'm like, and not going to talk to you anymore. Well, thank you. Ryan, question for you. So obviously you work in-house at a very complex brand, and I'm sure a lot of the startups in the room here have complex products and services, or haven't maybe honed in yet on what their messaging is and how to do their elevator pitch. What advice do you have for the folks in the room on really having success there and honing in on what their message is so that journalists can listen to their pitch and actually have success there?
Right. So tend to what we do. We really take our time with, again, like what we do before we go external. We really spend a lot of time internally to figure out what exactly we want to say. We know what we're going to sell. We've got the products. We've got the solutions. We know we're going to go after. But then we have to take a step back and say, how are we going to actually communicate this? So it's a lot of work that we do with the business team, the marketing side as well. I'm involved with it, and it just depends how wide of an initiative it is at the company. It depends on how many people get involved with it, right? But just to make sure that you have messaging that everyone is more or less singing from the same hymn sheet. Everyone's speaking with one voice at the company. You don't have one executive saying one thing that's completely contradictory to another one, right? Like everyone needs to know that, hey, this is the messaging that we're going to talk about this particular product, this is the way we talk about the company, and everyone says the same thing. So that's one thing in particular. Another thing too is also figure out how you can, relate to the audience that a readership that, for instance, on our end, we are known as an exchange company, but we have 30 different markets. We've got a massive listings venue. But where our fastest growing part of the company is actually our technology business. And that's a business where we sell technology to about 250 different market infrastructure organizations globally. So that's exchanges, that's brokers, that's regulators, all sorts of different kind of companies to help run their markets. And that's the fastest part of the company. So, one of the initiatives that we're really trying to do, particularly under our CEO, Adina Friedman, she's been with the company our CEO for about almost 3 years now. So she really wants to emphasize the fact that this business is the fastest growing part of the company, which means how do we kind of more or less start talking to more of a technology media for them to understand what we do as a technology company. Because again, and it's same with Amazon too, right? It's a lot of people would not know about AWS, but you know what? The people that probably cover it in the tech world, they definitely do because they've, so with us, we're a little bit, new to this, right? In terms of focusing on like a tech audience. So for me, I've got to get, again, that's what I keep re-emphasizing about being extremely targeted. So, for me, I need to get in front of journalists who, for instance, we've got a lot of efforts that we're doing in AI. We've got stuff we're doing in blockchain. We've got stuff we're doing in cloud. I need to get to know those journalists, and I need to get to know them really well so they can understand, why is Nasdaq writing me? This doesn't make any sense. I thought you guys just list companies all day long. And it's like, no, we don't. We actually have a lot more to tell here. So I think that's kind of important on that end. And also too, when you do get, opportunities where maybe you get some third-party endorsement, that's helpful for sure. For us, it'll be, for instance, on the analyst side. So a lot of times we'll get analysts that'll cover us, that'll, kind of help emphasize what our investment thesis is that matches kind of more or less our direction is going on from a business strategy standpoint. We can use a lot of that content to be able to help us with some of our pitches, because the journalists will want to talk to the analysts just to get kind of a third-party viewpoint on that. So it takes a long time, but it definitely pays off.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right, we're going to move over to Slido because we've gotten quite a few questions coming in. As a reminder, we've got about 20 minutes left, so if you got your questions, get them in now. First question for anyone here, where does guerrilla marketing fit into my early marketing strategy, and can leaning into guerrilla marketing too hard actually hurt my brand?
I mean, I immediately get a little nervous when I think about guerrilla marketing because I think of someone attacking me, but I guess maybe separate. That's probably not what your question was. I mean, I think it really depends on what your business is. If your brand is really scrappy, if you're very D2C, then I think guerrilla marketing can probably be effective. There's so much noise. I would just be careful over-indexing on stunts and kind of aggression, because it starts looking a little tragic, I think, if you're going too hard on that. But if it's so far away from your brand, or if you spend a lot of money on it and you're really hoping that this works and it kind of just no one really hears it, I think a thoughtful strategy, I think getting smart with content is probably a better investment. Sometimes some of these crazy marketing tactics can work, but it's a lot of stars have to align, I think, to really nail a crazy marketing tactic.
Yeah, and I was saying, not to mention that everyone's a critic, right? So, and particularly nowadays, everyone has some type of social media. So, if it goes wrong, it will definitely spread like wildfire. And I don't know and that'll be more of a challenge to have to clean that up afterward.
Yeah, I'm just going to reiterate what I said before. Spend your time, your effort, your money on making your product great. That's the best thing that you can do from my point of view in order to get our attention.
I'll actually add a tiny bit here. I'm a marketer at HubSpot, so I have an opinion as well. I think it really depends on who your audience is, who your target persona is. Right now, I've been doing a lot of research. Generation Z is all about the experience, right? All the retail brands now are building experiences in their stores, and that's great for that generation, and that's what the target audience is looking for. But if that's not what your audience is, it's just going to fall flat. And so I would actually reiterate what you said. Focus on the product, make something awesome. Okay, next question here. My startup has already had press pre-launch. It was unsolicited. Does it make sense to share the existing press articles and podcasts with new and different press avenues?
Yes. I think that that's the short answer. I think that someone's probably not going to write that exact story. I think it can give your company credibility. Let's say that you got a really amazing print story and that's in Bloomberg. You could certainly say, hey, we've got this momentum. I know for, let's say, on Squawk Box or something, you can show that to a broadcast journalist or a producer and say, we've got this momentum, would love to offer, our executive as a spokesperson. I think you want to be very mindful. Someone's not going to say, oh, wow, that's great, I think I'm going to write that story as well. But I think sometimes it can help to give, a lot of journalists are always looking for content. And so I think it can, someone that's writing features probably wouldn't do that, but someone that's maybe, if there's a big news moment, you can say, this has been covered here, I can offer you a different perspective. Or if there was a really big story and it maybe got scooped, then you can offer something different to that story, then I think that can work. But I would just be careful, and I think doing it with a relationship is usually a better way to do it. I'm sure, Lara, if you got an email with a bunch of media coverage from someone that you didn't know, maybe you would read it and say, well, that's interesting, but it would sort of feel a little strange.
Yeah, and I think if you're getting important coverage from really big outlets, we've probably seen it, and we're probably aware of you. And sure, it doesn't hurt to share that you had a really big breakthrough article. I'm certainly not going to, not talk to you because you were written up in the New York Times or Bloomberg. It's not a shoo-in. But yeah, sort of to what Tyler said, if a big story has already been written about you, most outlets, depends on the outlet, we're not going to want to rewrite that same story. So come to me and say, we had this great big story in this other big outlet. Here's a different story that you can write about us, because we certainly don't want to write the same thing that ran last week or last month in another big outlet.
I'd say that too, it also depends on the channel as well. So if you get, like a Bloomberg News story about you, maybe there's an opportunity where you could, I don't know, you can go to Bloomberg TV, or you can go to like a different kind of channel, like in terms of like, go to broadcast. If it's not written, go to, and vice versa. Maybe there's a way to do that. You never know. You can get. It also depends on how quickly you do it too. If it's like a month later, like I don't know, like maybe someone would cover, but it's that you need to do it right away if you're gonna want to do that. And then also too, you think about maybe just where are you gonna put that content at? Like we don't have that on our end where. Or if you go to our media center, it's it's press releases, it's press context, et cetera. But you might think about maybe there's a way to do where press coverage page, and a lot of that's to do with distribution rights, what you can and can't do. Maybe it's just logos of where you're at and it's linking to the actual article. But you kind of think about too about how your kind of coverage library, how you want to maybe potentially showcase that on your website, and it needs to look right, obviously, but something to think about there too.
Awesome, thanks. All right, so I've been looking at this question for a while. I'm really excited to ask it. So this person is a pre-launch, so they haven't launched their startup yet. What guidance can you give on getting coverage for a pre-launch startup, specifically on what topic they should be talking about, positioning themselves as an expert in the area versus getting coverage on the product? So topic specific, do you suggest product coverage pre-launch, or the fact that the founders and the founding team are experts in that field?
Definitely not that you're experts. There's lots of experts in every field. So that's not what's going to make you stand out. If you can explain to me what you do, why you do it, and why it's different from what everyone else does, that is your best bet. This is sort of tangentially related. I thought of an example. In our most innovative companies, which we run every year, this past February, we had a cold shipping logistics company, which sounds very dry on the surface. Apologies to Lineage Logistics, we love them. And their founder, or their CEO came in, and he explained to us how they're using very specific AI tools to make their shipping logistics company like 60% more efficient than it was last year. Now, that's not a story that I know off the bat when you tell me that a cold shipping logistics company is coming in to speak to me. But he came in and he thought to himself, what's the most innovative thing we're doing? What's different about what everyone else is doing? And what can I tell Fast Company to sort of show them how we're doing something that's totally different from what everyone else is doing? We were so blown away by it that it was in our top 50 most innovative companies of the year. I spent an hour on the phone with the man and probably could have spent more time talking to him about how totally innovative this use of a specific technology within his very objectively dry industry was totally rocking their world and rocking the rest of the world because of the way they were saving energy and helping the environment. So if you come to me and you can explain something like that, that's the best thing you can do pre-launch. So maybe you have a material that you're using that's going to not only change your product, but it's going to change all of the plastics industry, or some other kind of, you have a medical device that can be used in hospitals across the country, and it's not launched yet, but it's got FDA approval. Those are the kinds of stories that work for us personally. I can't speak to all other brands, but that kind of thing is probably more effective than just telling me what your company does or telling me that you guys are experts.
Yeah, I would say play your strongest hand, right? I mean, if let's say one of your founders just left, I don't know, I'm looking at something on the wall, let's say Oscar, and they founded Oscar, and they sold their last company for $1 billion, and they have a really quirky personality and are kind of a cult of personality. Yeah, get them forward. If your product won a bunch of awards and you went from 0 to 200,000 users in 10 minutes as soon as it was released, that's cool. Play that hand. So I think you need to see what is your strongest story and go with that. If you're really doing something incredibly different, if you've got this third-party validation that proves that out, play that hand.
And I think the key word there is, what is your strongest story? Not that you exist, not that you do something, but what is your story? Yeah, definitely.
And I would just add too, like, and I guess on the expert commentary standpoint, there's something wrong with that too, because that helps build street cred. So, and that could be also part of your way of making that initial outreach to journalists of kind of like what you do and, again, like what you can offer, et cetera. So, and then during those conversations, you can talk about the business that you have, et cetera. But, if there's a way to, and also think too about search engines, right? You want to get your name out there. You want to, and then a way to do that is get some good coverage if you can do it. And it might just be, it could be one quote in one story, but it could be a great story that gets a lot of traction. And again, like this, think about how you're creating who you're creating your brand publicly, and the many ways you can do that. And again, like it might not be a big bang right away. It might simply just be commenting on a story to help out a journalist, but that might just get the ball rolling.
Awesome, thanks. All right, Ryan or Taylor, this is probably best for you. When would you suggest a startup looks to hire an internal hire for PR versus an agency? This question is specifically about a 20-person company, but if you have suggestions on what size and how you would think about that decision.
You want to take it?
Yeah, sure. I would say it kind of just depends on how the company's structured. So if you, who would be handling the agency, right? Because it is a lot of effort, right? You can't just disappear and expect the agency just to do everything. You really need to incentivize them, and you need, in the sense of like, in terms of giving them content to work with. You need to like constantly be engaged with them. It's one of those things where you get the best relationship with an agency, I find, when you have a lot of contact, and it doesn't need to be crazy like several times a day, but there should be a good dialogue constantly with and vice versa, right? They should be coming with ideas to you, and you should be going back and forth. So who handles that relationship if at a 20-person company? Is it the CEO? Do you have a marketing head that kind of does a kind of a dual comms marketing role? It kind of just depends on how you're structured, and it depends on the organization, right? I mean, at our firm, we've got a couple agencies we work with, but a lot of the heavy lifting tends to be more in-house, and that's just kind of how we do it. But I think it kind of really just depends on the company.
All right, thank you. So we're getting close to the end of time, so I've got time for 2 more questions for you guys up here. The first one to all of you, but Ryan specifically first. Can you sum up how you would suggest founders should think about building their press strategy early on at their business? Sum up is a key word.
Yeah. Yeah, I think know your audience is going to be really, really, really important with this. Because, again, think about you guys are building products and solutions and services for clients. You should be treating the media the same exact way, in the sense of it needs to be incredibly targeted, and it should be really thoughtful. And, again, don't rush it either. I think if you get out the gate way too fast with it, you're going to tip over your skis, and it's not going to be good. So really take your time on doing this, and whether it comes from starting just internally with knocking out messaging that everyone can use internally when they ever talk externally. And a lot of this is going to be coordinated with sales, right? A lot of the stuff you guys will be talking to prospects and clients kind of almost the same way that you would talk with the press to some degree, right? In terms of how you describe your business and that sort of thing. So again, really take your time with it, really target the journalists that is really important for you. And honestly, not all of them need to get the big whale. They don't need the cover story, right? Like you might have a really niche product that has a really niche trade outlet that's the most important for you. It doesn't need to be the most glamorous outlet, but it's the one that's where all your clients are going after and reading, right? So just think about that. Like just kind of keep a little bit of a reality check in terms of who you need to be reaching out to, and then from there, really understanding that media landscape as best as you can.
Yeah, I agree with everything that you're saying. With a lot of our clients, we'll start off and say, what are your business objectives? And I would just be very critical about what your business objectives are for the next 6 months and think about how can communications support that. A lot of our clients' hiring is a top priority. So what stories could you tell that are going to attract people to your brand? Do you have an unbelievable parental leave policy and an incredible, cryo chamber in your lobby? I don't know. Like, thinking about something, it's very hard to differentiate on perks these days. That one just popped in my head. That would be very weird. But anyway, if you did, I think that someone would write that story, right? So if it's recruiting, if you're breaking into a new market, you need to establish credibility, let's say in the retail space. Do you have customers that you could align? So thinking about, for your business, what do you need to do to be successful, to reach those goals, and build a communication strategy that's very targeted towards those. Because otherwise you can get a bunch of buzz, and then if you've invested in PR, and then yes, you got traffic, but it didn't convert to anything, or you didn't really move the needle on your business objectives, your board, your investors, your executives are probably going to say, why are we spending this money right now? This is not making an impact. And so if it's very focused on what is going to make a difference, that's where I would start, especially if you have limited resources.
And sorry, I was saying one thing too is just to mention is like when you actually do get coverage, and you're sending it around to everyone. Hey, we just got this story. We're in Fast Company. It's great. Kind of think about how you also distribute that too,
Yeah.
right? Like, you also think about like, okay, maybe we should make sure we push this out on social media. Maybe we should think about how we want to send this to clients, if it makes sense to do that, unless it's too spammy, right? Like, there's all these different, once you actually get the coverage, that's really fantastic collateral. You can't beat the media coverage versus an ad in some sense, right? Because you've got that sort of endorsement from a journalist that says, yeah, these people actually, they've got something going on here and I want to cover them. So you've got that collateral now. So you got to figure out kind of more of a long term, what are you going to do with that? And some outlets too, you might have to, if you want to say, for instance, reprint it, you might have to pay them for that, right? Which, it can be expensive, but also could be well worth that spend too. So something to think about kind of in the long term once you actually get the coverage too.
And just really quickly, make sure you're ready for the coverage when you go out looking for it. If you come knocking at our door and then I turn around and I say, how many customers do you have? And you say, 2. Or I say, what other kinds of proof of your success or that people actually need this do you have? And you don't have any. And it happens. That's not a good position to be in. So when you come to the media and you say, we have this great story, we want to tell you about it, make sure that you have the information to back it up. Make sure you're ready to have a story written about you, because you do have to be at a certain level of success or a certain level of being close to launch or whatever before we can actually write about you. If it's just an idea, you're going to lose that opportunity.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. Well, over the last 60 minutes, you've shared some really, really wonderful information. I know I've learned a lot. I hope our audience has as well. In the last minute we have left, what is the final parting wisdom that you have for the founders in this room as it comes to PR and how they can think about that for their startup?
All right, fine, I will start. Demi. I think just really think if this is the right move for your business now. If you've got limited resources, think about what the ROI is going to be. And if you're not sure, I would probably say don't do it. I think you want to, I am obviously drinking my own Kool-Aid, but we have transformed businesses, but they have to be ready for it.
Yep. I would say really take your time with it and really target the right people, and no long pitches either. It's crazy.
Yeah, I would say make sure you're ready when you go to the media with your story. I would say be patient. The first 1, 2, 3, 5, 10 times that you email pitches over the course of a year, we might not pick up on that story. But at the end of the day, journalists, editors, we're people who are trying to put out really good information and really good narratives into the world. We want to help you. We want to write about your great business. We want to write about you as a person. If you have done something really amazing, if you're a really wonderful business person. And trust that if you're doing good work and you work with us and we get to know you, that your time will come. And it might not be the first or the second time that you reach out to us, but eventually you'll get the coverage that you deserve.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all so much. This has been really informative. Thank you all for coming. Really appreciate it.